Well, welcome to another edition of Deep Purple. No fancy graphics, no conference realignment for the future. We're going to talk about today. We're going to start a series introducing the new conference members to the Big 12 nation. And we're going to start with BYU and my good friend Jeff Hansen that works for our BYU site, Cougar Sports Insider. I can't remember, Jeff. I don't know it's 3 words. It's too many words for me.
It is.
It's a little brain.
It's too many words for me too.
And Jeff, if you want to go check out Jeff's work, he has the Daily Dose, not the Daily Delivery. And I think it's a great concept you came up with. I love it. I don't know where you got it from, but it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to take all the credit, but I had to come up with the Daily Dose. I think that's kind of the great value brand off of like Honey Nut Cheerios. It's not quite the real Daily Delivery, but I'm not going to get sued for calling it the Daily Dose.
I think you were safe on that. Okay, so let's start with a generic question about your outlook. What we should know about BYU football in 2023.
Yeah, this team's excited, and that seems kind of almost trite and really cliche. But over the last 10 years, right, of independence, the team's kind of been apathetic. Everybody's excited for football season, but after September rolls around and there's no conference chase and, maybe 1 or 2 losses along the way, BYU fans, there hasn't been much to cheer for or to look forward to. It's different games, different rivalries every year. So it's been different. And all of that's out the window now. So from a fan base, super excited fan base, but you can see that among the coaches as well. I think it's a huge relief for them to not have to worry about how to motivate a team on an independent football schedule anymore. They get to talk about conference football and they get to do normal college football things. And that feels good. The players are excited to be the first team in the Big 12. And I'm really curious to see how all of that translates onto the field because the excitement is palpable. I mean, across all levels of BYU, it's very real and very tangible and interested to see how that translates.
How competitive will this team be?
I think they have the pieces to be a lot more competitive than people think. It all comes down to Kedon Slovis at the quarterback spot. And look, Pitt Kedon Slovis was terrible. If that's the Kedon Slovis that BYU is going to get next year or this year, it's going to be a rough year for the Cougs. If they can get back to USC Kedon Slovis, even that year that he transferred, they have the potential to be a pretty good offense. Defensively, I think they're going to be much better than they were a year ago, but they were pretty awful, horrible, bad a year ago. That's a pretty low bar. But with a new defensive staff and a bunch of transfers in, I'm optimistic about the defense being good enough. And it all comes down to Slovis on the offense. If they can click like they have with Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall, then I think this team will surprise some people in the Big 12.
Maybe he didn't like the Eastern time zone. That's my explanation. How about basketball? What should we know about BYU basketball heading into this year, even though maybe the roster's not even put together like at K-State?
Right. No, there's still 1 spot left for the roster. Basketball, it's going to be a grind. I mean, you guys know as well as anybody, the Big 12 Conference, it's the premier conference, and that's not lost on Mark Pope or anybody in Provo, anybody who goes to BYU basketball games. And this team struggled in the West Coast Conference, especially when they would play teams like Gonzaga, who were a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, a little bit more athletic than most teams. And that's day in and day out in the Big 12 Conference. BYU's had some success. They've played Houston a couple of times in the past. And Houston, while they're a new Big 12 team, I think that they are in a lot of ways similar to the rest of the Big 12 Conference already from a basketball standpoint. And BYU's done okay. I just don't know if they have the depth and the consistency to do that for a full season. I think it's going to be a really, really tough year for Mark Pope's squad.
Yeah, it's a grind in Big 12 basketball. It's something else. What other sports does BYU bring to the table that fans might want to know about?
Yeah, BYU plays a ton of sports. So they have 21 varsity sports, and so they're all over the place. They've had a lot of success in some of their Olympic sports, particularly on the women's side. The women's soccer team was in the national championship just a couple of years ago. The softball team, I mean, they're not Oklahoma good, but who is? But they tend to be a pretty competitive team in a better than you realize West Coast Conference. And the men's and women's volleyball teams are both very, very good as well. They're fun to see. So There's a lot of sports. Golf, I think BYU tends to do pretty well in golf. They do a pretty good job in most sports. They struggle in baseball, and I think that's going to be a big adjustment for BYU going into a baseball conference. The Big 12 does well in baseball. BYU's had ups and downs, and I think it will be a lot of downs as they figure out how to build that roster for Big 12 baseball.
As a former volleyball guy, what conference is the men going to play in?
I think they probably remain in the MSPF where they're at right now. But I don't know if that's official yet.
Yeah,
I think that's
all those
what the plan is.
little things out there. And how can BYU baseball not be that good with that setting?
I know.
Oh my God. I want to play baseball, BYU, just because I won't play. I'll be in the dugout. I'll just stare at the mountains.
It's all the snow, man. I mean, that's what it is. You can only play so much baseball when there's a foot of snow on the ground. So
yeah, well, welcome to the Big 12. In the North, that's what we struggle with. That's why Iowa State just gave up on it. Okay, let's get to some fun stuff. Fan excitement for being part of the Big 12.
Yeah, through the roof. I mean, this is a fan base that dating all the way back to the 80s, right? I mean, BYU has always kind of viewed themselves on the outside looking in, whether BYU won the national championship in 1984, and then the NCAA kind of changed the rules on them. There was the Bowl Alliance after that. And BYU had a great season in 1996, and they were told that there was no chance they were going to get a national championship that year, no matter how good they were. They finished 14-1, and they weren't considered at all for any sort of national championship recognition. And then after the Bowl Alliance, there was the BCS. BYU, though they never made it to that New Year's Six game, 2001, they were kind of the original BCS buster. They were they were 12-0 going into their final game against Hawaii. And the BCS essentially told BYU, look, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're 13-0, you're still not getting into the national championship. And so BYU's always had this chip on their shoulder that they've always felt like they do belong, but the system has never cooperated with them. And this fan base, man, I can't express it enough how excited they are to finally belong. And we'll see if the NCAA changes rules on them again as a Power 2 or whatever emerges down the road. But for right now, for today, BYU finally has a seat at the table, and this fan base, it's been 40 years in the making.
Well, you're going to fit in well with Big 12 fans mentality, because outside of Oklahoma and Texas, nobody wants to include the rest of the conference that much. So that'll fit in very well. What are some realistic, expectations for this overall athletics first tour of the Big 12?
Yeah, I think over time, I think that this is a team that can be really competitive. I mean, we'll talk about football first. I think BYU has the coaches. Utah is a better than you realize recruiting ground. And obviously with the connections of the LDS Church, that kind of opens doors for a lot of players that really BYU shouldn't have any business getting. I mean, guys like Fred Warner, who are doing their thing in the NFL, there's no reason that Fred Warner should have turned down a USC and an Oregon to go to BYU, but he did. And that's because of the religious connection there. So I think BYU has the pieces to be competitive over time. They've got to build out depth and all of that good stuff. But I think on the football field, especially going into a conference that there isn't that one juggernaut, right? It's not Ohio State every single year. It seems to be fairly even ground that anybody could emerge. I think give BYU a few years and they'll be in contention. Across other sports, with the exception of basketball, like I say, that's going to be a tough climb for BYU for several years. I think other sports, especially the ladies' sports, I think that BYU is in a really good position to compete right away. I think that Big 12 conference foes and friends, they will find that BYU's a very good game, very competitive atmosphere almost on day one.
You're a pro. You led me right into the next question. Do you feel a rivalry maybe cooking with someone in the Big 12?
Boy, I hope so. I think it won't take too long for BYU and TCU to remember that they actually do kind of hate each other. From the old Mountain West days, man, that rivalry, that got pretty heated there for a while, and I think that will come back pretty quick. I think there's some brotherly love right now that, hey, we're back together. This is cool. We're in the party, but I think one Saturday that'll go away. And then I think BYU and Baylor, to me, it seems like a natural rivalry. I don't know that we'll ever replace some of Baylor's traditional rivals, but Baylor and BYU, they have some, similarities with a religious background. And right now, with Jeff Grimes having coached at both schools, Eric Mateos having coached at both schools, there's enough overlap and similarity within the program that I think those two teams could eventually become a pretty fun rivalry to watch within the conference.
Okay, if you take a Big 12 road trip, which one do you want to take as you personally?
That's a really good question. It feels like I'm sucking up a little bit, but Manhattan's right there on top of my list. I look at the environments, right? The environments that these stadiums can provide. I think a night game in Lubbock, like I don't really want to go to Lubbock very bad. I've been to Lubbock. It's not my favorite, but a night game in Lubbock is awesome. That's an incredible environment. I think when Iowa State is good, Ames is as fun as anywhere there is in the conference, I think. So that will be a fun game. And Kansas State, it's been fun watching Manhattan. That sellout crowd, those environments are really fun. That's one thing I'm excited about for the Big 12. They maybe don't have the destination, travel vacation cities, but they have super fun college towns and football environments. You really can't go wrong. There's not many environments that you look at and go, ugh, this isn't going to be good.
I have news for you. We added you because of the destination. we just really wanted that. And plus, we only had one set of mountains to go to, so now we got two.
Now we'll give you the real mountains. I mean, all due respect to those hills back east, we'll give you the real mountains out west.
Don't say that to West Virginia fans. Don't do it. They're named the Mountaineers, not the big hill ears. Okay, so you mentioned environment at Kansas State. Have this weird tradition of the Wabash Cannonball plays, and the students pump their arms and go back and forth. Is there anything at BYU that might be a tradition that needs a little explanation, or is something you're really kind of proud of?
I mean, nothing specifically comes to mind. BYU's tried a few different things to make tradition stick, and some have come and some have gone. But at I guess a higher level, night games at Lavelle Edwards Stadium, I think they're going to be kind of a staple just with TV schedules and all that.
Yeah.
Night games at Lavelle Edwards Stadium, it's as good of an environment as anywhere in college football. They are a lot of fun. So not one specific tradition, but if you get a chance to go to that 8:30 Mountain Time kickoff, drink a rock star before the game, but you're going to have a lot of fun while you're there.
Okay, that brings me to the last one. What's the one thing you would advise a friend visiting Provo for a game to do? Whether it's a restaurant, I'm not going to ask you about a bar, something scenic. The one thing that don't miss this. You got to do this.
Yeah, Provo. So the way Lavelle Edwards Stadium is set up, it's right on the base of the mountains. So you only got to go about a 10-minute drive up the canyon. And I believe they just changed the name. It used to be called Squaw Peak. Now I think it's called Kiev Peak. And it's about a 10, 15-minute drive from Lavelle Edwards Stadium, gets you right on the top of the mountains, overlooks the whole valley. You can do it on your way to the game, take a break from tailgating or whatever you want to do for a minute, and then just drive up there. And it's some of the most unbelievable views. I'm a lifelong Utah guy. I'm an off-roader, a Jeeper, all that stuff. Nice. I've seen it all, and that view still is just unbelievable every time I go. So I think that's one that people need to put on their list.
Okay, you're not on K-State's schedule this time around, but when I do come out to Provo, you're taking me off-roading.
Absolutely.
That's it for the BYU preview from our friend Jeff Hansen. We'll continue this tour next week, I think, with UCF, but don't call them Central Florida. They don't like that.